Okay, so it looks like we have a quorum. This is the Transportation Committee meeting of the City of Bloomington Common Council for Wednesday, May 13th, 2020. We have one item on the agenda tonight. It's the Appropriation Ordinance 20-02. So we can really just get right into the discussion of this ordinance, Appropriation Ordinance 2002. So this is to specially appropriate from the local income tax special distribution fund, the motor vehicle highway fund, the motor vehicle highway restricted fund, and the cumulative capital development fund expenditures not otherwise appropriated. Tonight we'll hear from city representatives. We will come to council for questions after we do an overview with the city. Then we'll go to the public for comment and get back to discussion and maybe more questions before potentially voting on a recommendation. Does that sound okay? Okay, great. Okay, so I think tonight we have Jeff McMillan, Deputy Controller, to give an overview of the ordinance. So I'll ask him to start, but I also wanted to introduce, we've got Neil Copper and Terry Porter from Planning and Transportation, and then Joe Vander Veen, how do I say your last name?
Van Deventer.
Van Deventer. Okay, here too from Public Works. So if you all would like to add anything in the overview stage, that's fine. Or if you want to just wait for questions, just let me know as we go on. Okay, so Mr. McMillan, if you want to do an overview, we're ready for you.
Okay, I'm Jeff McMillan, Deputy Controller for the city. And we have 4 different funds we're going to talk about tonight. The first one is the Local Income Tax Special Distribution Fund. Here we want to appropriate $900,000 to go with an NDOT match for the Sarah Road project. Of that, let's see, the next one will be the Motor Vehicle Highway Fund. And there we're going to be reducing the Motor Vehicle Highway Fund. This is because of a state legislation that went through, and we have to make a restricted motor vehicle highway fund with some restricted purposes on what they can do. And they told us at the end of 18, when 19's budget was already built, and we had to do it in 19 for 19's budget, and now we know more about it. So in 21 and going on, we'll just budget appropriately for it. And the other one is Cumulative Cap Development Fund, where we'll be moving asphalt money from the 200 supply area to the 400 capital outlays category or classification. And this is so we can match with the community's crossing grant and stretch our money a bit. So that's $386,000 there. So the net increase of everything is $900,000 in new money, all coming from the LIT fund. And I can take questions or go in a little bit deeper if you want me to, or.
I think I can ask any questions from council members right now.
What's the total cost?
Okay, council member. Oh, sorry. Council member Piedmont Smith, I think is first.
Yes, that was reviewed rather quickly, and I know some of us were at the work session and asked some follow-up questions then. But for the benefit also of the public and for our own review, I think it was a little too quick.
Okay,
so you said at the end, okay, so the first appropriation is $900,000 for the Sarah Road project. And then
right, that's right.
The second item is moving money from motor vehicle highway to restricted motor vehicle highway. That's fine. Then the third one was in the Cum Cap Development Fund, moving money from category 2 to category 4. So is that also from the lit? Because at the end
No.
you said there's a total lit distribution, and that confused
Right.
me.
Okay, so the one for the Community Capital Development Fund is just a zero net transfer from supplies to capital outlay. So we can leverage the Communities Crossing grant to do some, I believe it's asphalt work.
Where?
College Mall.
College Mall Road?
Yes, that'd be from College Mall from 3rd Street to Sayre.
Okay. And that was Mr. Van Deventer, for the record.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
I don't know if this makes sense, but for me, it's a little easier if we talk about the project separately. So if we would like ask questions about the appropriations for Stair Road and that project, and then potentially ask about the College Mall reappropriation, and does that, instead of kind of taking it
Yeah,
all, as does that make sense?
Yes.
That's fine.
Councilmember Boland? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I wanted to ask
Councilmember
about
Boland.
the Sarah Road multi-use path. Does it exist, or is it being improved?
This is Neil Copper in Planning and Transportation. This is filling in a gap, a missing path in the existing system. So between Cathcart and Buttonwood on the west side of Sayre Road, there's currently nothing. We would be installing path in that area.
Okay, just to clarify, so there's new multi-use path going on Sarah Road. So you're saying that there is a multi-use path north of that on College Mall?
There's multi-use path existing basically from Cathcart up to Moores Pike on the west side of Sayre Road. And there's multi-use path existing from Buttonwood south on Sayre Road.
Okay, I'm going to talk about north of Moores Pike. That becomes College Mall Road, right?
It does, yes. There is some multi-use path there. I don't know that it's continuous off the top of my head.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. And the okay, that's my question for now. I may have some more. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith, do you have a question still?
Oh, I was just going to ask if Mr. McMillan or Mr. Van, can you clarify? So both projects have a certain cost associated with it. The paving sounds like it's $900,000. So am I right? There's two projects kind of going on. How much is the second one then?
Okay, I know that the total project is 2.8 million, roughly 2,832,100, and the NDOT cost is 1,792,752, which leaves the city with a local match of the 1,039,747 or 347.
Okay, so the city's
Okay.
on hook for about $1,300,000, $1,200,000.
Right, well, about 1,000,001.
Okay,
1,040,000. And of that, there's 288,000 that we're using from the general obligation bond Series B from 2016. That was for signals and intersections. And we'll finish using that bond up. And then the balance is 750,000 with about $150,000 for change orders to equal that $900,000 we're requesting.
thank you for clarifying that for me.
Okay, other questions from council members right now? I have a few, okay,
Oh, go
No.
ahead, Kate. I have a second round question.
okay. I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around the lit special distribution fund dollars and how we do that. So if we can kind of go through that, I think that 75%, right, has to be used for roads, and that's right. We have the Roman numerals here about engineering, construction, street systems, recreational road projects, and then the remaining 25% can be used for anything. We tend to go put that in the general fund. I guess my question is, how does that process work? How do we make those decisions? Specifically, if we're looking at a road project that might need, you know, bike lanes, better sidewalks, where does that come into play here with what we're allowed to do with these funds? Does that make sense? I don't.
Okay. Yeah, I am trying to see where to start here. The city got $1.3 million in 2016. Of that, roughly 750,000 went to the general fund, which is the 25%, and the other 2.1 million went into the lit special distribution fund. Okay, so then we try to leverage the lit special distribution fund on projects with matches to help stretch the dollars.
Okay, so you leverage that 75%.
So we can leverage that 75% against the NDOT portion, so we can leverage that 900,000 and get one additional 1.7 million out of it. So for the project.
And that money all went to Stair Road. The 75% is what we're using to. Okay, we're using 900K to match the Stair Road project.
Right.
From the 75% of the lit.
Right.
Okay. Gotcha. Councilmember Boland.
Yeah. Does NDOT have jurisdiction over Sayre Road like it does over 3rd Street?
This is Neil. Sayre Road is the city's, and that doesn't have jurisdiction on that.
How about College Mall Road?
College Mall is also the city's up until 3rd Street.
Okay, that's what I thought. So NDOT, this is just sort of general. The purpose of NDOT's matching is to help communities maintain roads. Is that pretty much the thinking behind it?
Yeah, there's two things in play. The Sayre Road project, it's actually federal funding that we're leveraging, but it goes through NDOT.
I see.
The College Mall resurfacing, that's actually a state grant where state funds were matching with that one.
And that state grant is coming from not from NDOT, but is it going through NDOT too?
Yes.
Okay, just to clarify. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, so do I understand correctly that this was a one-time payment or transfer of funds from the state of excess local income tax distribution in 2016?
Correct.
Is there any way to predict whether we're going to get another influx of money like that in the future?
No, there isn't. This is the first one we've had, and it was in 2016. So that's been about 4 years ago.
So in a separate answer to me about some specific questions I had, you said that there had been an accumulated interest of about $104,000 in that lit special distribution fund. What does that just stay in the fund, and does that also have to be used for road projects then?
That stays in the fund. I would have to check to see if that can be used for, if that can be used for other things besides roads. I can check on that and get back with you.
Okay, I'd appreciate that.
Other questions from council members, committee members? I don't know what to say there. I have some
Committee
questions
members.
about the college committee members. I have some questions about the college mall funding and project. I think if I could get in there, I think these might be more for planning and transportation. I was reading a little about the community crossing matching grant, but I would like to run through that process with you all. What does that application look like, and what is our process for selecting projects?
The application was a collaboration between Public Works and Planning and Transportation. I mean, I think, I don't know if you're interested in the kinds of questions that are on the application, but it's, you know, location and description of work and why you're doing it, and traffic volumes on the street and crash data and a bunch of different variables that NDOT uses to prioritize who they're going to award the funding to. In terms of prioritizing what project, it has to be something that's very shovel ready. And if you looked at the community crossing requirements, it is fairly restricted for the types of projects they'd like to use. So I think just with discussions with the Public Works Department, they had identified a need for resurfacing on College Mall that this seemed like it would fit well with, and Joe may be able to weigh in more on that. And so this just seemed like a project that would fit really well and got prioritized to the top of potential projects there.
Okay, I wanted to follow up a little on that with you, Mr. Copper.
Mm-hmm.
In that process, now that we have a transportation plan in place, does that come into play when you're looking at road projects for applications?
Yeah, I think it would. The community crossings matching grant, everything we've heard from NDOT is that they've really been prioritizing awarding those funds for maintenance projects more so than kind of new construction projects. So that weighed pretty heavily on our thinking for, you know, what kind of project to apply for. But definitely moving forward with the transportation plan for this grant or any other grant or federal funding, the transportation plan is generally going to be the first place we look.
Questions from other committee members? Committee member Rowland?
Yeah, to follow up on that last statement, Mr. Copper, while the grants prioritize maintenance over new construction, is there any opportunity we've lost by just maintaining the road if there was any upgrade scheduled? I think the plan calls for changes to College Mall Road over time. Are we gonna, if we prioritize an improvement project for College Mall Road at some point in the near future, will we have missed an opportunity by not coordinating it with the maintenance that this grant would permit?
I don't think we really are. I know I also had some email discussion with Councilmember Rosenbarger about this. The kinds of changes that we're looking at on College Mall Road would either be a significantly larger project that we really wouldn't be able to leverage with something like this, or it's something where even if we resurface the street, we'd still be using all that same space in the future. We would still want to have that asphalt brought back into good condition for it. So we talked about everything from widening the street to removing lanes on the street. And in any of those scenarios, you either want to have all the existing space that you have and just utilize it differently, or you're talking about a very expensive rebuild. So while generally, yes, we want to we want to coordinate any changes on a street with anything else we're doing. I don't think we're missing any opportunities by resurfacing the street.
Okay, I think I might have more questions, but I'll defer to other members. Thank you.
Other members' questions? Yeah, I could ask too. I mean, I know that I'm not an engineer here for sure. I just am apprehensive with this project because it just feels like we are, again, putting our dollars toward improving roads for cars and not looking at improving our street system for people on bikes or people walking. So, I guess, I mean, I think about something like, can the lanes be narrow? Or I feel like bike lanes aren't really wide, and that can we find those feet in College Mall Road to put in some bollards during this project? Because from our emails, it seems like it's pretty inexpensive to do that.
So yeah, I'm definitely happy to look at options for adjusting, lane widths on the street, or are there sections where where all you have to do is reduce the width of the travel lane to install a bicycle lane. I'll tell you that some portions of the road that may be possible, but other portions of the road, the existing road isn't wide enough to keep the same travel lanes and to install bicycle lanes. I guess I'll also say that, even if we're able to do that, if we're able to reduce lane widths and install bicycle lanes, or even if we made the decision to remove travel lanes and install bicycle lanes, we would still want that resurfacing to proceed as planned. And if I can also touch on your comment about, basically spending money on the roads for motor vehicles instead of other forms of transportation, I also want to highlight that by resurfacing this street on a regular schedule and before it degrades further, the city is actually using its funds more efficiently. So you can compare a street, the top layer of the street to the roof of your house, where if you let it get too bad and you don't spend that money on it, you could end up losing your house. In this case, you end up losing the structure of the street. So it's actually better to do that preventative maintenance on the street to keep it, in good shape instead of spending even more money on it later.
Thanks. Council Committee Member, Piedmont Smith.
Yeah, if I could just follow up on that, Councilmember Rosenbarger's question. So I understand that this is a grant and it's a great opportunity to access state money to resurface the street. Is the decision about possible bike lanes, is that something that has a separate process here locally? That, if we're interested in exploring that there's another process we can be involved in?
Yeah, generally that's something that runs through the Planning and Transportation Department. We would evaluate the street and potential impacts. Yeah, there's not like a state controlled process or something like that.
Is a bike lane indicated along the College Mall Road corridor in our transportation plan? Councilmember Rosenbarger is nodding her head, so.
Protected
okay.
bike lane.
I believe the transportation plan calls for a protected bicycle lane on College Mall.
So that's something we can discuss further with your department, regardless of this grant being implemented.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Committee Member Boland.
So we just got the stunning news a few months ago before the pandemic that NDOT was resurfacing 3rd Street to put in bike lanes into narrow streets. They're not protected lanes, but still coming from NDOT, it's nothing short of astounding. And I'm not shy about saying that again here. Can you compare East 3rd Street's traffic volumes to College Mall Road? And perhaps answer the question for me, how much would it cost to put in the bollards that would make a bike lane protected on College Mall Road?
Sure. So the section of East 3rd Street that NDOT is converting lanes on, which is east of Clariz, has traffic volumes of about 18,000 cars per day at the highest location, and other locations it's lower than that. We don't have recent counts on College Mall, but we've extrapolated from some other data, and we believe this that College Mall has between 21 and 22,000 cars per day. If you just look at typical thresholds for successful lane conversions, the cutoff is generally around 20,000 cars per day. So NDOT's East 3rd Street project is below that typical threshold. College Mall is above that typical threshold. Again, that's just a typical, so you could do further analysis, but they are on opposite sides of that threshold. And then to answer your question about if we were to put in, to change the striping and put in just plastic flexible delineators, a ballpark cost estimate for those changes would be about $50,000.
That's it?
For just paint, I mean, is that a flexible post? Yeah.
Is that the preferred design of a protected bike lane? Like, is that ideal? Is there some more substantive thing than a bollard? I mean, what is the nature of the bollard, I guess, that you would get for that price?
Yeah, the bollard is, most people call them ugly. It's just a white plastic post that sticks up in the air. It's flexible. If you hit it, it pops right back up. It's not the ideal, no. That's the kind of quick and easy version. The ideal would be more on the line of a concrete barrier curb, or a planted strip or something in between the travel lane and the motor vehicle lane, or the motor vehicle lane and the bicycle lane.
Is it reasonable to assume that if well, I don't know how to put this, but you say that College Mall Road is slightly above the threshold for not removing a lane, whereas 3rd Street east of Clariz is slightly below it. But wouldn't the installation of say a concrete barrier cause a few, maybe 1,000 or 2 cars to opt for a different path to go somewhere because they can't go quite as easily as they used to, or quite as fast as they used to, because now there's a concrete barrier causing them to think twice about going a little fast on College Mall?
I don't know how much the concrete barrier would deter people, as much as if there was one less lane on the street and there was congestion, they may try for an alternate route. If we had more of a grid system in this area, it would be more reasonable to expect that. But there's not a convenient nearby additional large street that people would go to.
Okay, thank you.
Committee Member Smith?
So there's 2 differences, that you can put the plastic barriers up as opposed to concrete, and the plastic ones are less expensive. Is it something that we have enough space to do the plastic ones, or is that also prohibited by the width of the roads?
So we do not have space to both include a protected bicycle lane and maintain the same number of motor vehicle lanes.
I see. Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? I have a few questions from council members that they emailed me, so I will read a couple of these. It's about repaving. What's the typical repaving schedule for a road with traffic volume similar to College Mall? And when was this last stretch of College Mall repaved?
This is Joe Van Diemender. College Mall was last paved, I think it's been 20 years. It had a Paisley rating of 5, which is out of 10. And that rating was in 2017. So it's really starting to crack, alligator crack, and deteriorate a little bit.
Okay, and when do you typically repave with that rating system?
We would, on a road with those volumes, it's due right now, probably. We
Okay.
try to do them every 15 to 17 years.
Okay. Thank you. And a question about the grant, still from a council person. This is from Council Member Flaherty. He says there's a $1 million cap per year for this program. This project is only $386,000. Did we apply for any other community crossing grants? If so, what were they? Were they accepted? If not, does NDOT provide reasons why to help guide future applications?
This is Neil. I believe that was the only applications we submitted for this round. NDOT actually does 2 rounds of funding each year. So it's a $1 million cap per year. In the first round, we applied only for this project. In the second round, we haven't finalized what we'd apply for, but in discussions with IU Health, I believe the city has indicated that we would apply for some assistance up on Discovery Parkway for the Community Crossing Matching Grant to bring some of that road back up into shape.
Discovery Parkway is, I don't know where that is.
The road that runs in front of the new hospital. It used to be Range Road.
Okay, and has IU Health committed to matching the funds for that? Is that why we're looking at that?
Yeah, IU Health has committed I don't remember the exact amount of funds, but yes, funds for that.
Okay. Okay. Okay, other questions from Committee Member Boland?
I have 2 more questions. Let me pull up the first one. So help me understand the Lit Special Distribution Fund. This was funded from a one-time payment, or is this an ongoing fund? Where did the money come from again? The 2.3
It's a
million?
one-time payment. It's a one-time payment.
And what? I didn't see in the notes where it came from, where the money came from.
It came from the state, and I'm going to pull that up. Hold on.
And how long ago did it come into our possession?
We got it in 16. And
okay, that's what I thought I heard you say. Yeah.
Yeah. And let's see what it is. It's a lit. So when the state collects the local income tax, once the fund hits a certain amount at the state, they're required to refund the excess, and is distributed out to the communities.
So as you're saying, we established the LIT in 2016, or there was a LIT before that?
No, we established the special distribution LIT in 2016. We get the other LIT from that comes in monthly for local income taxes, and when the state builds up too much of an excess, then they have to divvy that excess out.
So in other words, we might have been due as a city for more of that, but that money got instead distributed to all the communities in Monroe County or throughout the state, or what?
I want to say
what I'm
statewide.
not clear on.
Yeah, statewide.
So in other words, this is sort of a bonus that communities across the state got in 2016.
Right.
Interesting.
And we
Okay.
did do an additional appropriation in 2016 for some of the money then.
Right, I see that there was 120 some thousand. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. The other question is for Mr. Copper. How much of College Mall Road would be would be affected by the inability to put in a protected bike lane because we'd lose a travel lane? What portion? I'm looking at a map of it now from 3rd to Morris Pike, and I'm curious to know about how much of it is causing that hamstringing us.
I haven't done a detailed analysis to say which sections could and couldn't. I would say probably you would end up losing a motor vehicle lane on the majority of the street, though.
Would that be north or south of 2nd Street, do you think?
I would think all the majority, so from Morris Pike up to 3rd. But again,
And,
I haven't done an in-depth analysis on that.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from committee members? I have a few more from council members. This is about the reappropriation of Category 2 funds into Category 4. If we hadn't had a mild winter where we didn't have excess in Category 2, where would the money have come from for the local match for this project? And now that we do have the money from salt and asphalt Category 2, is it, can we use that formally budgeted money for other purposes that were more in line with the comp plan and the transportation plan?
Okay. As far as the money budgeted, that came from street department. So I have to defer to Joe to answer that.
Well, that was kind of the beauty of this. We did have a mild winter, and we were able to. That's why this job fits so well. It fit into what we could afford. It fit into what we could match.
Okay, thank you. And the follow-up on that question is, are these funds limited to just repaving, or could we reappropriate these funds for other projects instead?
It's just paving.
Sorry, okay. I guess it's my understanding that we could instead reappropriate this money to put towards sidewalks or something. Like if we're moving from Category 2 to Category 4, well, could Category 2 funds go to just a different category? Uh-oh.
I guess Jeff would have to answer that.
Yeah, I'll have to look into. I mean, it can be moved to the categories. I have to check and see what all the fund is able to do.
Mm-hmm. And have we maxed out our repaving budget for 2020? I mean, that's about $2 million?
On our paving funds?
Mm-hmm.
It is roughly, we have about 700,000 in asphalt money.
Okay. And had that already been budgeted for this year?
Yes. We're using salt money that we had left over from the mild winter.
Okay, so if we had not had that salt money, funny to call it that, salt money, but okay. Yeah. If we hadn't, would we not have applied for this Community Crossings grant?
We would have had to search for money a lot harder. I can tell you that.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions from committee members? Piedmont Smith?
Yeah, I think I heard Mr. McMillan say he was going to look this up, but I just want to make sure. So what I'd like to know is what can the cumulative capital development fund be used for, and can it be used for pedestrian projects?
Okay. I'll look that up.
Okay. I think what I have left are more so comments. So other questions, or if not, we can go to the public for comments. Okay, or comments from other staff members. Okay. Committee member Smith, did you raise your hand? No, no, okay. Okay, so Stephen, do we have anyone out there who wants to make a comment?
I see I see a couple of raised hands. I think Mr. Dave Askins was the first one. He should be unmuted now and ready to comment.
I appear to be unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I would just say, please say your name, and if everyone is okay with this, we don't have a lot of commenters, I think, but still just keeping to 5 minutes.
Oh, I'll be way under that.
Okay, all right. So you never know. You never know.
Well, what I have is a question, and I apologize for any confusion that the question might tend to sow, but I wanted to follow up on a question that Councilmember Piedmont Smith asked along the lines of this 2016 special distribution lit. Is there more where that came from? And this might hinge on the difference between a special distribution and a supplemental distribution. I don't know, but the news out of Tuesday night's county council meeting was that Monroe County, no longer in Michigan, that Monroe County would be receiving, all told across all jurisdictions, around $5 million worth of supplemental lit distribution. County share around 1.4 million, and my back in the napkin says the city share would be around 1.4 million supplemental distribution. And so I had assumed that special distribution was different from supplemental distribution, but based on the description I just heard from the controller's office at this meeting, it sounds like it's sort of the same thing. If too much builds up in the trust fund, if it exceeds 15% of the total distribution, then the state goes ahead and distributes that money to keep too much from accumulating. And so my question is the city in fact getting more of the 2016 kind of money this year in the form of this supplemental distribution? That is to say, is the special distribution from 2016 actually just a synonym for supplemental distribution? That's the question.
It can be taken up after public comment.
Yes, thank you.
Our next speaker is Mr. Greg Alexander, who should be unmuted and ready to go.
All right. Hello, Greg Alexander here. I watch all the paving that goes on around town, and I have to say Public Works does an incredible amount of work. I don't want to pretend that their job is easy by any stretch. They paved West 17th Street, I think last year, by my house. And because there was no engineering plan to make it good, the road already had basically no sidewalks or non-contiguous sidewalks on one side of the street. And they just repaved all 40 feet wide of it. It's only 2 lanes wide, but it's 40 feet of roadway because it used to be a highway. And they didn't allocate any of that space to bikes. They made a huge, ridiculous suicide lane, a left turn lane, double left turn lane. And it's, why do we need that? And they just paved Arlington Road, northwest of there. And again, like where Arlington meets Prow, it is much more than 40 feet wide. You could play a football game in the middle of the road. It is amazing how big that road is. And they just repaved it without any sort of consideration for what could we use this space for besides it's literally unused. It is literally unused space. All it does is encourage speeding is all that space does. And you look at West 2nd Street, it's that same story. There's no sidewalks. It was just repaved just now. And they just, again, just locked in a huge oversized roadway without any sort of consideration for traffic calming or what we could do to improve the roadway. And this is when people say that roads are unsustainable, we mean literally that the road system we have costs so much to maintain, we can't afford to maintain the roads that we have. And so just as a matter of course, Public Works is spending these vast sums on maintaining these roads. And then if you want to do anything for pedestrians, it has to be special. We have to somehow find money out of a system that's already spent all of its money maintaining oversized roads. And that's really frustrating to me. We need to get, and I've seen a lot of signs actually of hope very recently. We need to get a process in place. I don't know if it needs a committee, a couple dedicated staff members for sure in planning and transportation, where just as a matter of fact, without any special consideration, we are going in an emergency reducing the size of some of these intersections, you know, curb bulb outs and you know, bollards in the middle of the intersection. These kind of things don't cost a whole bunch of money, but they take a lot of engineering will, because drivers will complain about them. They'll need maintenance. And we just need to get in the habit of every single chance we get, reducing the size of the roads, removing whole lanes in some cases, reducing the width of lanes. And this project doesn't do that. You know, none of this money does this. And that's really frustrating to me. I don't know exactly how we could work that in, but that's the direction we need to go, and we're not there yet. The other thing is, you know, the other half of this project is a side path, and in some sense, I'm all for a side path. It's a wide sidewalk. They desperately need more sidewalks down in that corner of town. But our own growth policies plan, which is what governed this project, because it was before our new transportation plan, says that when determining whether a side path should be constructed, the number of driveway or intersection cuts onto a street should not exceed 8 per mile. The reason is that cyclists traveling on side paths are not highly visible to motorists turning into and out of these street intersections. As somebody, when I was a kid, I used to bike on the sidewalk and I got hit twice in about 1,000 miles of travel. That's an incredibly awful ratio of people traveling with bikes counterflow on sidewalks. So, you know, and I look at this, it's supposed to be 8 crossings per mile is the absolute maximum, and there's 8 crossings and it's only 0.6 miles. So that's 12 crossings per mile of driveways. And some of these are just little piddly driveways, but some of these are fairly big, you know, with turn lanes even coming out of suburbs. And so people are gonna get hit if they bike on this side path. You know, the new transportation plan, of course, says in Appendix E, bicycle facility type, it says a multi-use path is not a substitute for the provision of on-road accommodation. Well, that's exactly what it was intended as when this project was conceived. And Appendix E target speed says, oh, and this is actually, let me jump tangents one more time. The intersection of Sayre and Morris Pike is going to receive a little bit of a revisit for this, and that intersection, it's a nightmare. It is absolutely a nightmare. You do not want to be a pedestrian there. The slip right turn lanes there they're 20 feet wide. A car is 6 feet wide. 3 cars could fit side by side making a right turn there at one time. And cars can make those right turns, given the radius and the geometry of those lanes. They can make those right turns at 30 miles an hour at full speed doing a turn. And you're just going to expect there's no stoplight, there's no traffic control. This is a side path that's going to be going through that slip lane. I just don't see anybody taking their kid there and that kid not getting run over. And
That's 5 minutes.
Oh, sorry. I just want to read one more. Appendix E target speed. It says elimination or reconfiguration of high-speed channelized right turns. And it's going to be really hard for us to re-engineer this at this stage, given how it was developed. But my God, wouldn't it be nice if we actually had something nice for pedestrians and cyclists in the city? Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Greg. Okay, with that, let's return to questions from committee members.
Can we just, we never really said, you know, for anybody in the audience that may be new, we didn't really instruct how they were to indicate that they wanted to make a comment. So maybe we can do that.
If anybody else,
one more
okay,
chance.
sure, yeah. If anyone wants to make a comment, you can raise your hand, which, Stephen, where is that on the screen? Is it at the?
I think it's at the bottom, or they can simply type into chat that they'd like to make a comment. I've not seen anybody else step up, but yeah, perhaps giving them a few more seconds to do that. Simply typing into the chat should be visible to all the meeting hosts.
Okay. It looks like no one else. I mean, since this is a committee meeting, I think if anyone has something, we can also be flexible if they're new and want to say something. Okay, I think we can move into questions and comments in a casual way, right, from committee members. Committee member Piedmont Smith.
Thank you. Mr. McMillan, can you speak to the question from Mr. Askins about the supplemental lit distribution that was announced at the county council meeting yesterday?
Okay, this is the first I've heard about that, so I can't really speak too much about it. And the difference between restrictive and is that directive came from the state that it had to be restrictive versus supplemental.
So is there a difference in terminology from the 2016 distribution?
Yes, it is restrictive. So, and that, like I said, came from the state. That's how it is. The special distribution.
So
supplemental would go back. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So supplemental would go into the normal route, which would be probably the general fund at that point. Where restrictive, they had us make a new fund and everything for it.
Well, I look forward to hearing more about this.
Okay.
Other questions, comments, committee member Smith, and then Bolin.
So I think encouraging bikes and walking is fantastic in our city. Is there some price tag on building out that road for a protected bike path? Is there some ballpark that you could tell us that would give us an idea what that means when you said it was, it would be, perhaps you said it would be cost prohibitive. What does that mean to us if we're going to spend 2.8 here? What is it if we want to build it out so that we get a protected bike path and ped path?
This is Neil Copper again. So the 2.8 million construction project, that is for the multi-use path and the intersection replacement of Sarah and Morris Pike. I think the majority of the questions previously about installing protected bike lines were on College Mall Road as part of that resurfacing. Are you asking about that one? Okay.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah.
So there's a whole lot of different variables that would go into the cost of a protected bike lane. If we assumed that, for example, that we're not removing a motor vehicle lane and we're instead relocating curb lines, and if we're doing, putting in concrete medians and things to really do an ideal protected bike lane, definitely talking about multiple millions of dollars there. So I'm not saying that that's cost prohibitive, but I am saying that it's expensive.
So what does that say to us as far as in our thinking about being consistent with the city plan and the transportation and the bikes and walking around? So does that mean that it's just our will to do it and then we can go find the money and do it? Or does that mean that it's really not something we can do right now for various reasons?
Yeah, definitely some of it is prioritization. So another thing that the transportation plan does is it gives some prioritization for what projects it recommends tackling first. College Mall would be a particularly expensive project. It might be something in some situations, especially if a street is redeveloping heavily, you can leverage development on the street. And while they're tearing up a curb in front of their, new building anyway, you can have them relocate it or put it in a better spot or whatever. Sometimes we would go after a larger federal grant for a job like this. Yeah, there's a lot of different scenarios and variables there.
Is that something that the city of Bloomington and you all could entertain?
Certainly we can entertain it. Yeah, I can't speak to how College Mall prioritizes among the list of many other projects immediately, but absolutely.
Well, I appreciate it. The one of the things in the back of my mind when I was asking this question was, if indeed down the road we want to become more consistent with the transportation plan and encouraging bikes and on that stretch, it would be probably unfortunate if we did all this great work now, and then we decided in a couple of years that, wow, we really wanted the bike path and the ped path, and we wanted a protected lane, but we kind of didn't do it at this point because it seems like it's a juncture where we could have the opportunity to do it now. So thank you for Mr. Copper for entertaining my questions, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Can I get one more clarification in there? So the College Mall Road project, the only thing we're doing right now, one, we're going to update the curb ramps on the sidewalks. We can do that with part of the grant. But the main thing we're doing on the street is milling off the top, say, 1.5 inches of asphalt and putting down a new layer of asphalt on top of that. None of that work that we're doing, I don't think we would regret any of that later if we were coming back to, say, install protected bike lanes or something else. This is all work that we would still want to be in place at that time.
So that would still be necessary even if down the road we decided we wanted to have protected bike lanes on that stretch.
Correct.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Committee Member Boland.
Well, to follow up on Councilmember Smith's very interesting questions, to mill College Mall Road now would mean to restripe it, would it not?
Yes.
Correct.
NDOT is literally restriping 3rd Street to make bike lanes, while the full protected with concrete lanes that Mr. Smith mentioned might be run into the millions. We've established that plastic bollards are nominal cost, $60,000 or so, in a fund that's been sitting fallow since 2016. Is there really no opportunity here to restripe College Mall Road so as to because here's the other thing I'm looking at. Before I get down to that, I also want to ask about the intersection of Sarah and College Mall. I'm looking at the multi-use path and intersection improvements project page, but I haven't yet found exactly what's being done to the intersection to improve it. What is being done to improve that intersection?
So
how
a
does
number of
improvement
things
defined?
Sure. A number of things. So one, all of the traffic signal equipment there is old and needs to be replaced. So it gets a completely new traffic signal. Along with that, we do things like installing signal backplates that make the signal more visible and tend to reduce crashes. We install pedestrian countdown timers so pedestrians know how long they have to cross the street. We install accessible pedestrian push buttons. We're also making a number of geometric changes at that intersection. So explicitly with the goal of improving pedestrian safety there. So today, if you're crossing the street, as Mr. Alexander noted, as a pedestrian, you're kind of around the corner and out of view and about to cross a, fairly long crossing with a really large radius. So we are actually reducing many of those radii so that vehicles going around that corner have to travel slower, and we are shortening crossing distances to have the same effect, and also so that there's less exposure for a pedestrian crossing that street.
Okay, well, this is exactly what I was getting at. I mean, I have many times driven to that intersection thinking it is big enough to be a roundabout. There's so much room in that intersection. And there especially, but all the way north on College Mall Road, it's a speedway because the lanes are very wide. I was going to ask what the design speed of College Mall Road and this intersection are, and I'd be very interested to hear the answer, but I know the de facto answer. It's much higher than the 30-mile-an-hour speed that it's that College Mall Road is signed as. And so if we are literally, in fact, improving this particular intersection, which is the end of College Mall Road, in order to make it safer for pedestrians, let alone, God forbid, we make it more inviting for pedestrians, it seems to me that logic should follow northward. That especially considering southward, we're putting in a path to make it more pedestrian appealing. But in this case, it seems that if we were to follow, of all people, NDOT's lead on East 3rd Street to narrow lanes and slow down the de facto speed on College Mall Road through protected bike lanes, however, non-permanent, with the plastic bollards, I think it would be a tremendous improvement. Does planning and transportation have an objection to, incorporating this idea at some point along with the milling project, since it's a chance to restripe?
I think probably the primary objection, so NDOT's project that we've referenced on East 3rd Street, one, the volumes are lower, but two, there was significant analysis that went into that and traffic simulation and a lot of close study on that street for what we think the impacts would be. We have not done that study on College Mall. When you talk about removing a travel lane, in certain scenarios, it works where you're not creating congestion, you're not creating backups, you're not creating, queues of cars that actually stack up through adjacent intersections, which can create significant potential safety concerns. So we haven't done any of that analysis here. We can certainly do that analysis. I'm not opposed to looking further at this street. But I do also want to bring us back to, even if we went that route, we would still want to resurface, we would still want new asphalt on this street. So regardless of kind of what paint we put down afterwards, we still want to bring that asphalt back up.
Thank you.
Other questions from committee members? I think all I have left, well, I do have one question about, again, the application process for the grant. It seems like these grants come out, the applications close at the same time every year, I'm assuming. Let me know if that's wrong. So, could we change our process so we do more prep, so we, could have done traffic counts on College Mall Road to know what we were working with before we applied for this grant?
So the grant is relatively new. It's only been out for a few years, and they actually changed it maybe last year, where they changed the deadlines and that now you apply twice a year instead of once a year. But to answer your question, yes, I would hope that we get, now that we know this is coming annually, I hope that we have a prioritization process in place, and two, more time to analyze and work on design for a street before the application goes in.
Thank you. Okay, Committee Member Boland?
Well, I'm just going to make a comment now. I mean, if we're in comments, period.
I say go for it.
Like, okay, thank you. Like, I appreciate everything Mr. Copper has said, and you know, I'm really conflicted here. I mean, I understand the reasonableness rather of well, it's just milling, but the collective request here really does beg the question. You know, are we not essentially still prioritizing automobiles? We would want to. I mean, Mr. Copper says we would want to do this no matter what, but it's just making the road better for cars to go as fast as they have been. And the combination of the building of a multi-use path on Sayre just south of this intersection, the improvement to the intersection itself to make it safer for pedestrians, and NDOT redoing 3rd Street in a way that continues to stun me because they're not known for their interest in transportation other than cars, almost begs the question, why don't we do this now too? Why don't we find some way to at least put up plastic bollards in a way that, I mean, if there's any way we can do it without reducing lanes, it's great, but I just don't think it's enough. Like, I want to know what it's going to cost to do the traffic study. I want to know what it would actually, is it possible to do even a partial, like going one way, have a protected lane instead of both ways, so that we don't have to get rid of a lane. But the 2 lanes each way simply prioritizes cars. I mean, people aren't riding bikes there because it's unsafe to do it, not because they don't necessarily want to. So I find it difficult to accept this on its face without answers to those questions. So I'm hoping we'll go to a second committee hearing in 2 weeks and to try to get some answers there, because I think we need to act now, not later, to make everything all the way up Sayre Road and College Mall Road be more welcoming to bikes and pedestrians. Thank you.
Comments from other committee members? Piedmont Smith?
Yes, I think that we definitely, okay, let me back up a minute. So this appropriation ordinance on its face is kind of just moving money around and allocating money that was already intended for the purpose that it was intended for. So that's on its face, and that's good that we have these grants, you know, to work with. I think it's excellent. So congratulations to anybody who helps apply for those funds. However, I think the ensuing conversation that we've had in the last hour is very insightful and very helpful to us as we look comprehensively at the city's transportation priorities, which have been codified as our priority is multimodal, and even more emphasis on non-vehicular traffic or you know, what used to be called alternative transportation, bike, ped, and transit. So I think it's a useful conversation. But if I rein it back into this appropriation ordinance, I support this appropriation ordinance. The lit special distribution fund, the money in there has to be used for road projects. I would love to say, let's go repave a bunch of sidewalks instead, but we're not allowed to do that with this money. And the Sayre Road project seems worthy to take care of that egregiously over-designed intersection where, yes, I have actually been guilty myself of doing a right turn at 30 miles an hour. It's terrible. It's ridiculous. So to address that and to extend the side path along Sayre Road, those are both worthy goals. The second part of the app ord is just moving money from motor vehicle highway fund to restricted motor vehicle highway fund, so no problem there. The third part is for the College Mall Road repaving. We received this grant, which covers 50% of the cost. I think it would be stupid to leave that on the table. I mean, we need to go along the timeline to approve the money so that we can get the other half from the state. I don't know how tight that timeline is. I mean, maybe we do have more time to investigate a bike lane on College Mall Road, but I want to access that money. That's money for our community, for a repaving project that is overdue. I respect what Mr. Copper said, that you know, the addition of a bike lane can still be done later, even if we have the repaving done this year using this grant money, this 50% grant money. We could still do restriping later. We could do the bollards later. We could, you know, we could address what's in our transportation plan and what we must address, which is improving the bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure on that very busy street. I mean, I don't think we have the time between when we need to pass the appropriation ordinance to access the grant money and having all the final answers on this bike lane. I just don't think, you know, I think we need to study that that street more carefully and see how we can best improve the bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure there, and not just slap on a bike lane to this project. It can be done later in a more thoughtful way. I mean, maybe a side path is the answer, because then you'd get the width of the sidewalk and you could expand that. And maybe that's more feasible. I have no idea. So as far as this appropriation ordinance, I support it. I do think it has opened up a lot of interesting questions. I'm looking forward to hearing whether we can use the interest that has accumulated in that special lit distribution fund, whether we could maybe use that for bicycle and pedestrian projects. I'd like to hear more about what the cumulative capital development fund can be used for. You know, maybe next year, if we have another mild winter and we have leftover money, could we use that for sidewalks? So this has raised a lot of interesting questions and issues that we should pursue as council members. We should insist that the transportation plan projects be enacted. But at this time, I support the ordinance. Thank you. And I want to thank Mr. McMillan. I didn't want to criticize him earlier when I said, you're going too fast. It's just we have to keep in mind that this is the first public meeting, really open meeting on the issue. And so I want to make sure the public understood the ordinance.
Thank you. Committee member Smith, do you want to make a comment? No, okay. I have a comment. I think it's going to be pretty disjointed, but it's just a bunch of bullets from today, but here we go. So 2 weeks ago in our budget advance meeting, I made it a point to say, I really think we have to stop doing business as usual and prioritizing cars. It's not what our comp plan says. It's not what our transportation plan says. And I just think we continue to dump money into helping drivers get around at the expense of other modes of transportation. And I have a lot of concerns here, right? You know, it makes sense we have this grant so that we match it and we get matching funds to repave this, but we're also then spending $386,000 of our own money on making it more pleasant to drive, when $386,000 is actually the annual budget of sidewalks for the Planning and Transportation Department. So it's hard to say that that's a small amount of money when it's all the city has to use for sidewalk projects. For me, this does go back to the beginning of this process, right? I know our transportation plan is almost a year old. It was enacted in July of 2019. And so asking, right, when we are starting to apply for these grants, and what does that process look like between Public Works and Planning and Transportation? Do we look at the high priority bicycle network list that the transportation plan has in it to guide this process? I mean, I think we should be doing that. The transportation plan says, you know, there are 2 phases. First phase is a list of projects for the first 3 years, and the second phase is years 2 to 4. And being a year in, where are we on those 1 to 3 year projects? Have we implemented any? Have we completed any? I don't know the answer to that question. It also talks about these opportunity projects, right? That we have the high priority network list, but also if we are doing other projects and we can piggyback on those, we should take that opportunity to improve those streets for all modes at that time. And do we do that yet? I'm not quite sure. I see that this road needs to be repaved and that we could put bike lanes in later, but that does mean we're closing it twice, right, to traffic. We're having employees out there twice. And I do think it just adds a lot of cost to the project. So, I mean, I think a lot of this is, we'll get better at it, right? And it's going to be done in the front end. It's going to be done before we get to this point that we're at. We're talking to council, that some of these questions get answered or considered right in the beginning with the comp plan and the transportation plan. I mean, Committee Member Rowland touched on this. When we're looking at traffic volume counts, I think we need to look at how we move people through this space with every mode of transportation, right? Not just looking at cars, because I think it's true. If you build it, they will come. No one wants to bike on this road right now. No one really wants to walk on it. It's fast moving cars. The lanes are wide, right? It's pretty easy to get through there. And it's a lot of cars. So it's just not a place for people on bikes or people walking right now. And we've got to think, right, how can we get folks, you know, can we transfer 10% of car traffic there into bike or ped? And then are we okay with 2 lanes and a turn lane? What does that look like? Yeah, this sounds off topic, but I would love to see from Planning and Transportation with the 2021 budget. I know we're looking at the pandemic costs and expenses and a different kind of budgeting process, but a real plan to implement phase 1 of the transportation plan and what that might look like. Does it come from actual money in our budget? Is it bigger than that? And I think it might be. Do we need to bond for that? But I don't like us saying all the time that we need to try to piece together leftover money for sidewalks, right? And bike lanes. I mean, this should be as important as salting our streets for cars. We should also salt sidewalks, right? And I mean, right, I know this is coming as an appropriation, and in the beginning it seemed just like, right, moving money around is okay, but it really is about priorities. The community crossings grant, I think it was said, you know, they want shovel-ready projects. Well, can we have shovel-ready multimodal projects for these kind of grants that pop up so that we are just ready? I mean, to go with those, especially if we're applying again here in the next couple of months. Part of me wants to talk about an amendment to this ordinance where, because I'm in approval of the Sayre Road funding, I'm not quite sure about this, because I do think if I am practicing my priorities, I just don't know if I can make this a priority. I mean, if this repaving was a priority, why didn't we have it in our schedule for 2020? We have $2 million, right, for repaving. So why wasn't it there in the first place? So I don't know what that looks like. I would like to have a little discussion if we want to have a round 2 of this committee meeting, if we can get our questions answered in the next week and go on to regular session, or like what committee members want to do here.
I just wanted to chime in that next week is the publicly advertised public hearing on this appropriation ordinance. So at a minimum, the full council next week will have to have this ordinance appear on the agenda, take comments from the public, and perhaps that can serve as the a second meeting. The council doesn't have to act next week if it's not ready to vote on the appropriation ordinance. If the ordinance is postponed, we can simply state publicly the next meeting that'll be taken up. So, but there will be an opportunity next week. Sorry, go ahead.
I thought that this was the publicly advertised meeting, that this committee meeting was it.
No.
I mean, okay. The council is unlikely to send it back to committee, simply put. So if that's the case, then not only is it, there's no point in having a second meeting, but it sort of undercuts the opportunity of the committee to work respectfully. That's too bad. That's nobody's fault. I just, we've got to find a better way.
And just as a point of information, we did submit a request or a question to the State Board of Accounts. All the materials I've seen have referenced that the proper fiscal body, references to the full body, has to conduct that public hearing. It's possible that they'd be okay with delegating that responsibility to a committee, but without an affirmative answer, we didn't want to risk somebody being able to challenge the process. So just because of how the timeline worked on publishing the notice, we went with May the 20th. So, and again, the council doesn't have to act that night if it's not ready.
Well, I think we've got some questions that need to be answered, and I think we can work with staff this week. I can be in touch with staff to get committee members' questions answered, and we'll be able to discuss all of that, write up the report, and have it for next week. Committee member Rowland.
I just want to say I did drop the ball. I should have asked questions in writing before this meeting, so I apologize for it. I want to thank Mr. McMillan, Mr. Van Deventer, and Mr. Copper and Ms. Porter for their presence here tonight and for answering all of our questions. I agree with Councilmember Piedmont Smith that the issue at hand is the third part. I don't have a problem with the other two parts, but you know, I don't think all of our questions have been answered, and so it's incumbent on me to put the final questions in writing, which I'll have by Friday. So I want to thank you all for the opportunity, and yeah, I think we should make a recommendation to the council tonight.
Okay, I think that sounds good. And if we do just follow our land use timeline a little bit, we submit questions by Friday, I think, and then if staff can get back Monday or Tuesday, and then we'll have that ready for discussion on Wednesday at council.
I pledge to do that. Yeah, I pledge to do that. Yeah.
Is that okay with staff too? Is that enough time? Okay. Okay. Isabel.
Didn't we decide that rather than submitting questions by the end of the day Friday,
Sunday.
by the end of the day Sunday, because nobody would read them between the end of the day Friday and the end of the day Sunday anyway. That gives the council members the weekend.
It gives council members more time. Yeah, is that agreeable?
But yes, we should have done that, and I did that, but we should have reminded everybody to do that prior to this meeting.
Yeah, I apologize. I thought about it last week, and then I kind of fell apart. It was my first time sharing, but I'll be better at some reminders and discussion ahead of time. Committee member Rowland.
Well, the reason I suggest Friday is because if staff is anything like council members, they maybe occasionally can't avoid checking their mail occasionally. And if I can get them questions by Friday so that they can think about it over the weekend, I mean, it's up to, I guess I need to ask them, would it be any benefit to them for me to give questions by Friday? I'm happy to take the time and submit them by Sunday, but I want to know if it's of any use to Mr. Van Deventer, Mr. Copper, Mr. McMillan.
What time Friday are you considering? By the close of business?
You tell me. What time's best?
We
Beginning of the day Friday, I'll send it to you Friday morning.
the earlier the better. But we'll take care of it, Councilmember Bowling. We will.
I'm going to get you my questions by Friday morning. I don't know about anybody else, but again, because I didn't send you them a week ago, I'll do better. So you'll have them by Friday morning.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments?
Recommend do pass.
I have a
Sorry.
comment.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Committee Member Piedmont Smith.
I believe that the Community Crossings Grant Program, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that it cannot be used for pedestrian and bicycle projects. It has to be used for road projects. So that's a drawback of that particular grant. I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, I think it is pretty specific. I took an AIM class session on it, and it seemed very car oriented, but I mean, my thought here is if it just costs a little more to tack on something that we have as a priority in the transportation plan, and sometimes we can cobble up money, that I would like to entertain those ideas. That was just my thought.
Thank you
on that. Yep. Okay, so are we ready for a
move to pass?
Recommend do pass.
Recommendation? Okay.
Second.
Okay, so I just call your name. Is that how this works?
Yeah.
Really, usually we go in order. Okay. Councilmember Boland?
Abstain.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith?
Yes.
Okay, Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Okay, and then there's just me. So I'm going to say the way this is right now, I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel comfortable approving it. So I'm going to be a no on this right now. Okay, so we have 2 yeses, 1 no, and 1 abstention for our recommendation. I don't know. I mean, I guess that means we don't have a recommendation to take back to council right now. Is that how I would?
It's a neutral
that?
recommendation. It's simply not positive. Yeah.
Okay. 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 Just moving along in my little agenda here. I think that's all we've got. We can move to adjournment. Is that right? Sounds good. Okay, so it looks like we've concluded our business. Okay, great. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay, great. So that's it for today. This will go on to council as a neutral recommendation, so just neutral, and that will happen May 20th, 6:30 p.m.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Good
you
night.
so much.
Thank you.
Good night.